Right now, in this exact moment, something inside you is doing more than listening. It's selecting, filtering, deciding what's real before you even have a say in it. You've never been told this. No one sat you down and explained it. But it's been running the whole time, quietly, invisibly behind everything you see. And here's what's strange, really strange. The moment it watches, things change. Not metaphorically, not in some poetic feel-good way. Physically, measurably, in a lab, under controlled conditions, with photons, electrons, particles smaller than anything you've ever held or touched or seen. They behave differently when observed. Let that land for a second. The smallest building blocks of everything you call real shift depending on whether or not someone is paying attention. Not touching, not interfering, just looking. Now, if that's true at the quantum level, and it is, it's one of the most replicated experiments in the history of modern physics, then what does that say about your life? About the things you keep seeing show up? The loops you can't break, the patterns that follow you from city to city, relationship to relationship, the reality you swear you didn't choose. What if you did choose it, not with your actions, not with your plans, not with your effort, but with your attention, with the quiet, invisible way you look at things before you even realize you're looking? I know, that sounds like a lot, but stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through over the next hour isn't theory. It's not motivation. It's not something I read somewhere and decided to repeat to sound interesting. It's something I had to live through and lose through to understand. And once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. You won't want to. So let's begin, not with answers, with the right question. What exactly happens when you look? In 1801, a man named Thomas Young did something that should have been simple. He took a beam of light, aimed it at a barrier with two thin slits, and watched what appeared on the screen behind it. What he expected was two clean lines of light, one for each slit. Simple, logical, predictable. What he got instead was a pattern. Bands of light and dark, an interference pattern. The kind of pattern you only get when waves overlap, like ripples crossing each other in water. Light was behaving like a wave. That alone was a revelation. But it wasn't the part that shook everything. That came later, much later, when physicists started sending particles, single particles one at a time, through those same two slits. Here's what should have happened. A single particle goes through one slit or the other. It hits the screen. You get two clusters. Simple, but that's not what happened. Even when fired one at a time, the particles built up an interference pattern, as if each single particle was going through both slits at once. As if it was interfering with itself, as if somehow it existed in multiple places at the same time, until it landed. Now pause on that, because your rational mind is going to try to explain it away. It's going to say, well, that's just how tiny things work. But that response is a defense mechanism, because what this experiment is actually showing you is something your everyday logic was never built to hold. A single particle with no one watching behaves as if it's everywhere at once. It holds all possibilities open. It moves as a wave of potential, not committed to anything, not locked into any single path. But the moment you place a detector at the slits, the moment you try to observe which slit the particle goes through, everything changes. The interference pattern disappears. The particle behaves like a particle. It picks one slit, one path, one outcome. Not because you touched it, not because the detector physically pushed it somewhere, but because you looked. Let me say that differently. The act of observation, of conscious measurement, collapsed an infinite field of possibility into one single concrete event. This is not philosophy. This is not a metaphor I'm borrowing to make a spiritual point. This is the double-slit experiment, and it has been replicated thousands of times in laboratories all over the world for over a century. And to this day, no one can fully explain why it works the way it does. Richard Feynman, one of the most brilliant physicists who ever lived, once said that this single experiment contains the only mystery of quantum mechanics. Everything else is just details. So let's sit with the mystery for a moment, because most people hear about this experiment and they nod. They think it's interesting. They move on. But very few people stop and ask the question that actually matters. If a particle, the fundamental unit of physical matter, exists as a wave of possibilities until it is observed, then what does that say about the world you're seeing right now? Is it solid? Is it fixed? Or is it being shaped moment by the way you're choosing to look at it? Think about your morning. You woke up. Maybe you checked your phone, maybe you felt that familiar weight before your feet even touched the floor, that heaviness that says, "Here we go again." And from that very first feeling, from that very first observation, your day began to take shape, not because the day was destined to be heavy, but because you observed it that way. You looked at your life through a filter you didn't know you were wearing, and the particles listened. That sounds poetic, I know. But here's the thing. It's not just poetry. Every thought you have is an electrochemical event. Every emotion creates a measurable electromagnetic signal. Your heart alone generates an electrical field that can be detected several feet away from your body. You are not a passive observer floating through a pre-built world. You are an active, radiating, measurable field of energy, interacting with everything around you, whether you're aware of it or not. And if the double-slit experiment taught us anything, it's this. The interaction matters. The observation matters. What you pay attention to is what becomes real. Not eventually, not after years of practice. Right now, in the same way that a photon collapses from wave to particle the instant it's measured, your reality is collapsing into form based on what you're measuring, what you're expecting, what you're looking for. The problem is, most people don't know what they're looking for. They think they're looking for change, for peace, for abundance, for love. But underneath that conscious desire, there's a deeper observer running a much older program. And that deeper observer, that's the one we need to understand. Because it doesn't operate on logic. It doesn't follow your vision board. It doesn't care about what you wrote in your journal this morning. It runs on something far more primal. Something you built a long time ago, in a moment you've probably forgotten. Let me give you an example. And I want you to be honest with yourself here. Have you ever wanted something, truly wanted it, and the moment it started getting close, you pulled away? Maybe it was a relationship that was finally working. Maybe it was money starting to flow in a way it never had before. Maybe it was a feeling of peace that showed up one afternoon for no reason, and instead of letting it stay, something inside you got suspicious. Something whispered, "This won't last." That whisper is your observer, not the conscious one, not the one listening to this video right now, nodding, open, willing to learn. I'm talking about the one underneath, the one that was shaped by the first time someone you trusted let you down, by the first time you reached for something beautiful and it was taken from you, by the first time you learned, not with your mind but with your body, that the world is not safe. That observer made a decision, quietly, without your permission. It decided what reality looks like, and it's been collapsing your wave of possibilities ever since. Every morning, every interaction, every time you walk into a room and scan for what might go wrong before you even check for what might go right. You're not doing it on purpose. That's the whole point. The observation is happening below the level of your awareness. It's automatic, reflexive, invisible, like breathing, like blinking, like the way your pupils adjust to light without you telling them to. And this is where the double-slit experiment stops being a physics lesson and starts becoming personal. Because if observation collapses possibility into reality, and if your deepest, most ingrained observation is running on autopilot, then your life isn't being shaped by what you want. It's being shaped by what you expect, and those two things are almost never the same. You want love, but you expect disappointment. You want freedom, but you expect the other shoe to drop. And the field responds, not to your words, not to your affirmations, to the signal underneath. The question isn't whether the observer effect is real. Physics settled that a long time ago. The question is, which observer inside you is doing the looking? Because until you can answer that honestly, without flinching, you'll keep collapsing the same reality, over and over, wondering why nothing changes when you've been trying so hard. But here's the part that should give you chills. If the wrong observer can collapse your life into a loop, then the right one, the conscious one, the one you're waking up right now, in this moment, can collapse it into something entirely different, something you haven't seen yet, something that's been waiting in the wave for you to finally stop looking away. And that is exactly where we're going next. There's a question that most people never ask themselves, not because it's complicated, but because the answer is uncomfortable. The question is this: when you look at your life, your relationships, your health, your finances, your inner state, are you seeing what's actually there, or are you seeing what you've been trained to see? Because those are two very different things. Let me explain what I mean, and I want to use something real, not abstract, not theoretical. Something you've probably experienced this week. You're driving, someone cuts you off. Immediately, a story starts. People are reckless. Nobody cares, the world is getting worse. And within seconds, your body responds. Jaw tightens, hands grip the wheel, heart rate climbs. You're not just thinking a thought. Your nervous system has entered a state, and from that state you now observe everything differently. The next driver who hesitates at a green light becomes more evidence. The slow line at the coffee shop becomes confirmation. The email from your boss that's slightly short in tone becomes proof. Proof of what? That the world is exactly what you already decided it was, before you even left the house. Now, here's what's fascinating. Another person in the same car, on the same road, getting cut off by the same driver might laugh, might not even register it, might be so absorbed in a song or a thought or a feeling of gratitude that the event simply passes through them without leaving a mark. Same event, different observer, completely different reality. And this is not about positivity. I need you to hear that this is not about putting on a smile and pretending life is beautiful when it's falling apart. That's performance. That's suppression. And suppression is just another form of unconscious observation. You're watching your pain and deciding it's not allowed to exist, which only drives it deeper. No, what I'm talking about is something more fundamental. I'm talking about the lens itself, the thing you look through before you even begin to interpret what you see. In neuroscience, there's a concept called predictive processing. Your brain doesn't passively receive reality, it actively constructs it. Before sensory information even reaches your conscious awareness, your brain has already made a prediction about what it expects to find. And then, and this is the key, it filters incoming data to match that prediction. You don't see the world as it is, you see the world as your brain expects it to be. And your brain's expectations are built on one thing: your past. Every experience you've had, every emotion you've stored, every conclusion you've drawn from pain or pleasure, all of it feeds into a predictive model that runs constantly beneath your awareness, shaping what you notice and what you ignore, shaping what you call real. This is not opinion, this is measurable. In studies on perception, researchers have shown that people literally cannot see things their brain doesn't expect. It's called inattentional blindness. You can look directly at something, it can be right in front of your face, and if your brain has no framework for it, it becomes invisible. Think about what that means for your life. How many opportunities have you looked directly at and never seen? How many moments of beauty passed right through your field of vision and left no trace, not because they weren't there, but because your internal model had no room for them? How many times has someone loved you and you couldn't feel it? Not because the love wasn't real, but because your observer, your deep, conditioned, wounded observer, had already decided that love like that doesn't come to people like you. That's the observer effect playing out in your daily life, not in a lab, not with particles, with your marriage, your career, your sense of self, your ability to receive what's already being offered to you. And here's where it gets deeper. Your brain doesn't just predict what you'll see, it predicts what you'll feel. Before a conversation even starts, your nervous system has already prepared a response based on past data. Before you open that email, your body has already braced or softened depending on who it's from. Before you walk into that room, your field has already expanded or contracted based on what happened the last time you were in a room like that. You think you're responding to the present, but you're not. You're responding to a memory wearing the mask of the present moment, and because your response matches the prediction gets reinforced. The loop tightens. The observer becomes more certain. And certainty, false certainty, unconscious certainty, is the most dangerous thing a human being can carry, because certainty stops you from looking. When you're certain you know how something will turn out, you stop observing with fresh eyes. You stop being present. You start projecting. And projection is just observation without awareness. It's the observer on autopilot. It's the collapsed wave pretending to be the only possibility. Think about a belief you hold about yourself. Something deep, something you'd be embarrassed to say out loud. Maybe it's, I'm not enough. Maybe it's, I always get left behind. Maybe it's, good things don't last for me. Whatever it is, notice how it doesn't feel like a belief. It feels like a fact. It feels like something you discovered about reality, not something you created. But it's not a fact, it's a prediction. A very old prediction that your brain keeps confirming because it only lets you see the evidence that matches. This is what physicists would call a measurement problem. And you, your unconscious self, are the measuring device. A device that was calibrated in childhood under conditions you didn't choose, by people who were themselves miscalibrated. And no one ever told you that you could recalibrate. No one told you that the observer can be changed, that the lens can be cleaned, that the wave of possibility never actually disappears. It just waits, patiently, quietly, for you to stop looking through the old filter and start looking, maybe for the first time, with clear eyes. Bruce Lipton spent decades studying how cells respond to their environment, and what he found is profound in its simplicity. The cell doesn't respond to the environment itself. It responds to its perception of the environment. Change the perception and the cell changes its behavior, not over years, in moments. You are made of trillions of those cells, and every single one of them is listening. Not to what's happening out there, but to the signal you're sending from in here. The observer isn't just a concept in quantum physics. It's the operating system of your biology. And right now, most people are running a version of that operating system that was installed 30, 40, 50 years ago. An operating system that was designed for survival in an environment that no longer exists. And they wonder why life feels like a loop. They wonder why they keep attracting the same situations, the same types of people, the same outcomes dressed in slightly different clothing. It's not bad luck. It's not karma in the way most people understand it. It's the observer, your observer, faithfully, relentlessly, brilliantly collapsing the infinite field of possibility into the only reality it knows how to see. But the field is still there. It never left. Every possibility you've ever wanted is still suspended in that wave, uncollapsed, unchosen, waiting. And the only thing standing between you and a completely different experience of life is a shift in the one doing the looking, not in what you do, in how you see. That shift is closer than you think. And it doesn't require force. It requires something much harder. It requires you to stop being so sure about who you are. Let me tell you something that took me years to understand. The hardest prison to escape is one you don't know you're in, not because the walls are thick, not because the guards are strong, but because the prison looks exactly like normal life. It feels like just the way things are. And the moment something feels like just the way things are, you stop questioning it. That's what identity does, not the identity on your driver's license. Not your name, your job title, your social media profile. I'm talking about the identity underneath all of that. The one that whispers in a voice so familiar you mistake it for truth. The one that says, I'm the kind of person who, and then fills in the blank with a limitation you never consciously chose. I'm the kind of person who struggles with money. I'm the kind of person who always gives more than they receive. I'm the kind of person who can never quite get there. That sentence. I'm the kind of person who is the most powerful observation a human being can make. Because it doesn't just describe reality, it instructs it. It tells the field what to collapse into. It tells your nervous system what chemicals to produce. It tells your brain what to filter in and what to filter out. It tells every cell in your body what environment to prepare for. And it does all of this silently, automatically, without asking your permission. You've been making this observation for so long that it doesn't even feel like an observation anymore. It feels like gravity, like something you can't argue with, like something that was decided before you arrived. But it wasn't. It was built, layer by layer, experience by experience, one collapsed wave at a time. Let me take you back for a moment. Not to a laboratory, to a kitchen table. You're 7 years old, maybe 8. Someone you love, a parent, a teacher, an older sibling says something to you. Maybe it's sharp, maybe it's dismissive, maybe it's not even directed at you, but you absorb it anyway, because that's what children do. They don't analyze, they absorb. And in that moment, something inside you makes a conclusion, not a thought, a conclusion, a decision about reality that gets stored not in your mind, but in your body, in your posture, in the way you hold your breath when someone raises their voice, in the way your stomach drops when you're about to ask for something you need. That conclusion becomes a filter, and that filter becomes your observer. From that point on, you start looking at the world through it, and the world, being the responsive, participatory field that quantum physics tells us it is, starts reflecting it back. You expect rejection, so you become hypervigilant for signs of it. You find them everywhere, in a glance, in a pause, in a text message that took too long to arrive, and each time you find what you were looking for, the identity gets stronger, the observation gets more automatic, until one day, decades later, you're sitting in your car after a conversation that went wrong, again, and you say to yourself, see, this is just how it is. This is just who I am. And in that moment, the collapse is complete. Not the collapse of a wave function in a physics experiment, the collapse of a human being into a fixed identity that was never real to begin with. I want to stay here for a minute because this is the part where most teachings get it wrong. They tell you to change your thoughts, to replace negative beliefs with positive ones, to affirm your way into a new identity. And I'm not saying those things are useless, but they miss the deeper point. You can't think your way out of an identity that's stored in your body. You can't affirm your way past a nervous system that is wired to expect danger. You can't visualize abundance while every cell in your body is vibrating at the frequency of scarcity. It doesn't work, and if it did, it would have worked by now. You've read the books, you've done the exercises, you've tried, and some of it helped for a while. But then the old pattern crept back in. Not because you failed, but because you were trying to change the picture on the screen without changing the projector. The projector is your state, your physiological, emotional, electromagnetic state. And that state is determined by your identity, by the observation you're making about who you are moment to moment below the level of thought. Joe Dispenza talks about this with a precision that cuts through the noise. He says that most people try to create a new future with the same personality that created the past. And personality, your personal reality, is just a set of memorized thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that have become automatic. Unconscious. Hardwired, you wake up in the morning and before your feet touch the floor, your body is already producing the same chemicals it produced yesterday. Not because today is the same as yesterday, but because your identity is the same, and your identity tells your biology what to prepare for. This is not abstract, this is measurable. Your brain fires in the same patterns, your heart sends the same rhythmic signals, your cells receive the same instructions. And then you walk into the world and say, nothing ever changes. And you're right, nothing changes because the observer hasn't changed. The observer is the identity. The identity is the state. The state is the signal, and the signal is what the field responds to. This is why two people can stand in the same room, hear the same opportunity, and have completely different experiences. One person's field is open, their state is coherent, their observer is awake and curious. The other person's field is contracted, their state is defensive. Their observer decided 3 decades ago that opportunities like this don't work out for people like them. Same room, same opportunity, 2 entirely different collapses, and neither person is doing it on purpose. That's the tragedy and the beauty of it. It's not willful, it's automatic, which means it can be changed. Not through force, not through discipline, through awareness, through catching yourself in the act of observing. That's the real shift, not changing what you believe, but catching the moment before the belief fires, the microsecond between stimulus and response, where the old identity is about to speak, and choosing just this once to not let it finish the sentence. That's the space, the quantum space, the space between the wave and the collapse. And in that space, everything is possible. Not because of magic, because of physics, because the wave hasn't collapsed yet, because the particle hasn't chosen a path, because you, the conscious observer, the one who is here right now listening, haven't made your measurement yet. And here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. You can't enter that space by trying harder. You enter it by letting go, by releasing the grip of the old identity just long enough for something new to come through. Not something you planned, not something you scripted. Something you've never seen before, because the old observer would never have let you see it. It's like trying to see a new color. You can't force it. You can't study your way there. You can only soften your eyes enough to let something unexpected in. And the moment you do, even once, everything begins to shift. Not because you've mastered a technique, but because you've proven something to your own nervous system. You've shown it that the old identity isn't the only option, that there's a space between who you've been and who you could be. And that space is alive. It's vibrating. It's full of the same potential that a photon carries before it's measured. You are that photon. You've been collapsing into the same point, the same path, the same life, not because it's the only one available, but because it's the only one you've been observing. But now you know. Now you see the mechanism. And seeing the mechanism is the beginning of becoming a different observer, the kind that doesn't predict, the kind that doesn't project, the kind that looks at the field of possibility with nothing but presence and lets reality reorganize itself around a new signal. We're going to talk about how to generate that signal. But first, I need to show you something about the heart, because the observation doesn't start in your brain. It starts somewhere most people have completely overlooked, Most people think observation happens in the brain. That's where the thinking is. That's where the analysis lives. That's where you decide what's real and what isn't. So naturally, if you want to change the way you observe, you should start there. Right? Wrong. And this is where the whole conversation takes a turn that most people don't see coming. Your brain is not the primary observer. It processes, it categorizes, it narrates. But the first signal, the initial reading of any moment, any environment, any person, doesn't come from your head. It comes from your heart. And I don't mean that in a sentimental way. I'm not talking about following your heart like some greeting card philosophy. I'm talking about measurable, documented, electromagnetic reality. Your heart generates the strongest electromagnetic field in your body. Not your brain, your heart. And that field extends several feet beyond your skin in every direction. It's not contained within you. It radiates outward. It interacts with the environment. It touches other people before you say a single word. The HeartMath Institute has spent decades measuring this, and what they found is something that should fundamentally change the way you understand yourself. Your heart sends more information to your brain than your brain sends to your heart. Let that sink in. The flow of information is not top-down, it's bottom-up. Your heart is reading the environment and sending instructions to your brain about how to interpret what's happening. Your brain then follows those instructions, filtering, sorting, predicting, based on the signal it received from below. So when I said earlier that most people are observing through a filter they didn't choose, the filter isn't just mental. It's cardiac, it's rhythmic, it's embedded in the very beating of your heart. And here's what determines the quality of that signal: coherence. When your heart rhythm is erratic, jagged, uneven, chaotic, it sends a very specific message to your brain. That message is, something is wrong. Prepare for threat. Narrow the focus, activate survival. And your brain obeys. It narrows your perception. It shuts down creative thinking. It activates the amygdala. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. And from that state, you observe the world through the lens of danger. You see problems, threats, obstacles. You miss what's right in front of you because your biology has decided that survival is more important than possibility. This is the state most people live in. Not occasionally, chronically, day after day, year after year. A low-grade, constant state of incoherence that shapes every observation they make without them ever realizing it. But when the heart rhythm becomes coherent, smooth, ordered, wave-like, something entirely different happens. The signal it sends to the brain changes, and the brain responds by opening up. The prefrontal cortex comes online, creativity expands, perception widens, the filters relax, and suddenly you start seeing things that were always there but hidden behind the static of your own stress response. This is not meditation hype, this is physiology. Your state of coherence literally determines what you're capable of perceiving. It determines which version of reality you collapse into form. Think about a moment when you felt deeply at peace, not because everything was perfect, but because something inside you settled. Maybe it was a sunset that caught you off guard. Maybe it was holding someone you love and feeling for just a few seconds that nothing else mattered. Maybe it was a walk you took alone where the noise in your head just stopped. In that moment, your heart was coherent. Your field was organized. Your observer was clear. And I'd be willing to bet that in that moment, the world looked completely different. Not because the world changed, because you did. Your observation changed. And reality, the felt, lived, experienced reality of your life, shifted with it. Now here's the part that changes everything. You can learn to do that on purpose, not by thinking your way there, not by repeating mantras, by training the heart itself to shift into coherence, by learning to generate specific emotional states, not as performance, not as pretending, but as a genuine physiological shift that changes the electromagnetic signal you're broadcasting into the field. And the emotions that produce the highest coherence are not what most people expect. It's not excitement, it's not the high-energy, fist-pumping state that the motivation industry sells. It's gratitude, appreciation, care. A quiet, sustained feeling of being connected to something that matters. Those emotions, when genuinely felt, not thought about felt, create a heart rhythm so coherent that it reorganizes your entire biology. Your immune system responds, your hormonal balance shifts, your brain waves synchronize, and your field, that invisible, measurable, radiating field around your body, becomes a different kind of signal, a signal that the quantum field recognizes. I know that sounds like a leap, but follow the thread. If observation collapses possibility into reality, and if the heart is the primary organ of observation, and if the heart signal is determined by its coherence, and if coherence is generated by specific emotional states, then the emotion you sustain is the observation you're making. Not the thought, the emotion, the feeling you carry in your body when no one is watching, the baseline state you return to when the distractions are stripped away and it's just you, alone in the quiet. That state is your observer. That state is your measurement. That state is what the field is responding to every second of every day. And most people's baseline state is fear, or frustration, or a dull, unnamed anxiety that hums beneath everything like a frequency they've stopped noticing because it's been there so long. That frequency is an observation. It's collapsing the wave. It's selecting from the infinite field of possibility the outcomes that match its signal. And it's doing it with the precision of a laser, because the heart doesn't guess. It broadcasts, so the question becomes very simple and very hard. Can you change your broadcast before your reality gives you a reason to? Can you feel gratitude before the thing you're grateful for arrives? Can you feel peace before the situation resolves? Can you feel wholeness before the relationship heals? Can you feel abundant before the money shows up? Because that's what the physics is asking you to do. That's what the observer effect actually demands. Not that you react differently to what you see, but that you generate a state that is independent of your circumstances, a state that comes from within. A state that is the cause, not the effect. Greg Braden calls this feeling as though your prayer has already been answered. Not hoping, not wishing, feeling. In the body, in the heart, in the field, as though it's already done. And when you do that, when you genuinely feel the reality of something before it physically appears, you're not fantasizing. You're observing. You're collapsing a wave. You're selecting from the field. And the field, which has been waiting for a coherent signal, begins to reorganize around you, not in some distant, mystical future, in ways you start noticing within days. Small things at first, a conversation that goes differently than expected, a door that opens from a direction you weren't looking, a feeling in your body that something is shifting, not because of what happened, but because of what you're becoming. The observer is changing, and when the observer changes, everything it observes changes with it. But there's a catch. And it's the reason most people who understand all of this still don't experience the shift. The catch is the moment between the old state and the new one. The gap, the void, the place where you've let go of the old observer but haven't yet stabilized the new one. That moment is the hardest thing a human being can endure. Not because it's painful, because it's unknown, and the body, your brilliant, protective, ancient body, is terrified of the unknown. That's where we need to go next. Into the void, into the space where transformation actually happens. And I'll be honest with you, it's not comfortable, but it's the only place where anything real can begin. There's a space that nobody talks about. Not really, not honestly. Everyone talks about the breakthrough, the transformation, the moment where everything clicks and life suddenly starts flowing. You see it in the testimonials, in the before and afters, in the stories people tell at seminars where the audience claps and the music swells, and everyone believes that change is a straight line from intention to result. But it's not. It never was. Between who you've been and who you're becoming, there is a space. And that space is not beautiful. It's not inspiring. It doesn't look good on a thumbnail. It feels like nothing is working, like you've lost the ground beneath your feet, like the old version of you is dying and the new one hasn't shown up yet. And you're standing in the middle, alone, wondering if you made the whole thing up. That space is the void, and it's the most important place you'll ever stand. Because this is where the observation actually changes. Not in the moment of clarity, not during the meditation, not when you're reading the book or listening to the podcast and everything makes perfect sense. It changes here, in the ugly, uncomfortable, uncertain middle where nothing is confirming your new direction and everything inside you is screaming to go back. Let me tell you what happens in the void. Physiologically, neurologically. Because if you understand the mechanics, you'll stop interpreting the discomfort as failure. When you begin to change your state, when you start generating a new emotional signal, a new observation, a new way of seeing, your brain doesn't celebrate, it panics. Because your brain's job is not to make you happy, its job is to keep you alive, and for your brain, alive means familiar, known, predictable. Even if that familiar state is miserable, at least it's mapped. At least the brain knows what chemicals to produce, what threats to scan for, what patterns to follow. The moment you introduce something unfamiliar, a new feeling, a new thought, a new state of being, your brain treats it as a threat, not because it's dangerous, because it's unmapped. And unmapped to a survival system that's been running for hundreds of thousands of years equals potentially lethal. So it fights back. Hard. It gives you every reason to quit. It reminds you of every time you tried before and failed. It plays the greatest hits of your worst moments on a loop. It whispers, "Who do you think you are?" It floods your body with anxiety, with doubt, with a heaviness that feels so real you become convinced that the old identity was right all along. This is not a sign that something is wrong. This is a sign that something is working. Read that again. Let it settle somewhere deeper than your intellect. The resistance you feel when you try to change is not evidence that you can't. It's evidence that you're actually threatening the old operating system. You're actually disrupting the old observer. And the old observer, like any system that's been in control for decades, does not go quietly. It rages. It bargains, it seduces, it does whatever it takes to pull you back to the known, to the familiar emotional state, to the identity that, despite all its limitations, at least felt like you. And most people give in, not because they're weak, because nobody told them this part. Nobody told them that the void is not a detour. It's the destination, that the discomfort is not a problem to solve. It's a threshold to cross. That the moment where everything feels like it's falling apart is often the moment right before everything reassembles in a new configuration. In physics, there's a concept called entropy. It's the measure of disorder in a system. And what's interesting is that before a system reorganizes at a higher level of complexity, entropy increases. Things get more chaotic, more disordered, more uncomfortable. The system looks like it's breaking down, but it's not breaking down. It's breaking open. Your life does the same thing. When you start changing the observer, when you commit to a new state, a new signal, a new way of collapsing the wave, the old structures begin to dissolve. Relationships shift. Routines stop working. The things that used to comfort you feel hollow. The mask you've been wearing starts to crack. And for a while, it genuinely feels like you're losing everything. But what you're actually losing is the illusion, the scaffolding of a false self that was held in place by an unconscious observation. And when that scaffolding comes down, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like freefall. This is where faith comes in. Not religious faith, not blind faith. Functional faith, the kind that says, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I can't go back. Once you understand that your reality is a reflection of your state, once you truly get that the observer is collapsing the wave, you can't unsee it. You can pretend, you can numb, you can distract. But the knowing is in you now, and it will whisper to you in every quiet moment for the rest of your life. So the only option is forward, through the void, through the discomfort, through the part of the journey where no one claps and no one sees, and the only evidence you have that something is shifting is a quiet, stubborn feeling in your chest that says, keep going. It's fragile at first, uncertain, like a signal that keeps cutting in and out. You'll have moments of clarity followed by hours of doubt. Days where you feel like a completely different person, followed by days where the old identity hijacks you so completely that you forget anything ever changed. This is normal. This is the process. The wave doesn't collapse into a new reality overnight. It takes repetition. It takes showing up every morning and choosing the new state before anything in your environment confirms it. It takes generating the emotion of the future in the body of the present, over and over and over, until the new signal becomes stronger than the old one, until the new observer becomes more familiar than the one you're leaving behind. Joe Dispenza calls this becoming greater than your environment. And what he means is exactly what we've been building toward this entire video. It means reaching a point where your internal state is no longer dictated by external circumstances, where you stop waiting for reality to give you a reason to feel different, and you start being the reason, where you stop being the effect of your life and become the cause. That's the shift. That's the real observer effect in action. Not a theory, not a concept. A lived, embodied, daily practice of choosing who you are before the world tells you who you should be. And when you stabilize there, not perfectly, not permanently, but consistently enough that the new state becomes your baseline, the field begins to respond. Not because you've earned it, not because you've performed enough rituals or said enough affirmations, because the signal changed. And when the signal changes, the response must change. Not as a reward, as a law. The same law that makes a photon collapse from wave to particle. The same law that makes a detector at the slit change the behavior of matter. The same law that governs the smallest particle and the largest galaxy. Observation determines reality. And you, the real you, the one sitting in the void, holding on to nothing but a feeling that hasn't been confirmed yet, you are the observation. You are the experiment and the experimenter. You are the particle and the detector. You are the wave learning how to choose its own collapse. And the void you're standing in right now, it's not empty, it's full. Full of every possibility that hasn't been observed yet. Full of every version of your life that the old identity couldn't see. All it takes is one coherent signal, one sustained observation, one moment where you hold the new state long enough for the field to recognize it as real. And from that moment on, reality doesn't go back. It can't. Because the observer has changed, and everything the observer touches changes with it. Now, there's one more thing we need to address. The part that makes all of this not just a beautiful idea, but something you can carry out of this video and into the next moment of your actual life. So now you understand the mechanism. You've seen the experiment. You've felt the implications. You know that the observer collapses the wave. You know that your heart leads the signal. You know that the void is not a setback but a threshold. And you know that identity, the silent, automatic story running beneath your conscious mind, is the lens through which reality takes shape. But knowing is not enough. It was never enough. There are people who can explain quantum physics perfectly and still wake up every morning in the same emotional prison. There are people who've read every book, attended every seminar, and can articulate the observer effect with stunning clarity, and their lives haven't moved an inch. Because understanding the map is not the same as walking the territory. So let's talk about the walk, the actual daily, unglamorous practice of becoming a new observer. And I want to be clear about something before we start. This is not a technique. Techniques are things you do for 20 minutes and then forget about for the rest of the day. This is a way of being. It's something you carry with you into the shower, into the car, into the difficult conversation, into the silence before sleep. It doesn't have a beginning and an end. It has a beginning, and then it becomes your life. The first thing is the morning. And I don't mean a morning routine in the way the internet has turned that phrase into a performance. I mean the first 60 seconds after your eyes open. That window, that tiny, fragile window, is the most important minute of your day. Here's why. When you first wake up, your brain is transitioning from theta waves to alpha waves. It hasn't fully locked into the conscious, analytical mind yet. The filters haven't come online. The identity hasn't fully reinstalled itself. For a brief moment, you're in the gap. You're between programs. And in that gap, you have access to something extraordinary, the ability to choose your state before the old one chooses for you. Most people waste this moment. They reach for their phone. They check the news. They scan for problems. And within seconds, the old observer is back at the controls, running the same program, producing the same chemicals, collapsing the same reality. But if you can catch that moment, if you can stay in bed, eyes closed, and deliberately generate a feeling before you generate a thought, you change the entire trajectory of your day. Not by planning it, by feeling it, by placing your attention on your heart and producing a state of genuine gratitude or care or quiet awe before your environment gives you any reason to. This is the practice, not thinking grateful thoughts, feeling them in your body, in your chest, letting the warmth of appreciation spread through you like something real. Because it is real. It's an electromagnetic event. It's a signal. And the moment you generate it, your heart enters coherence, your brain receives a new instruction set, and your observer shifts. For 3 to 5 minutes. That's all. Not an hour. Not some elaborate ceremony. Just a few minutes of sustained feeling. Of holding a state that is not a response to anything outside of you. A state that you are creating from nothing but intention and presence. And then you open your eyes. And you get up. And the real practice begins. Because the morning feeling is not the destination, it's the tuning fork. It sets the frequency. But the actual work, the work that nobody talks about because it's not dramatic enough for a seminar stage, is carrying that frequency into the moments where it gets hard. The email that irritates you. The driver that cuts you off. The comment from a coworker that lands wrong. The bill you didn't expect. The silence from someone you love. These are the moments where the old observer will try to reassert itself, where the old identity will rise up like muscle memory and say, "See? I told you. Nothing's changed." And in those moments, you have a choice. The same choice the particle has at the slit. You can collapse into the old pattern, the known, the familiar, the safe, or you can hold. Just for a second, just long enough to notice the impulse without following it. That noticing is the new observer, not the reaction. The noticing, the awareness that rises above the pattern and says, I see what's happening, and I choose differently. You won't do it perfectly. Some days you'll catch it, some days it'll catch you. Some weeks you'll feel like a completely different person, and some weeks you'll feel like you're right back where you started. That's not failure, that's the wave. That's the signal strengthening and weakening as the new observer builds itself one moment at a time. The key is to stop measuring your progress by what's happening outside. Stop looking at your bank account as proof. Stop checking your relationships for confirmation. Stop scanning your life for evidence that the shift is working. Because the moment you start looking for proof, you've become the old observer again. You're back to measuring. You're back to predicting. You're back to needing reality to validate your state instead of letting your state generate your reality. And if you've been with me until now, if you've stayed through the science, through the identity, through the void, through all of it, then I want to pause for just a second and say something. If you're here at the end of this video with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and walk with us every day. Not because I need numbers, but because this work is not meant to be done alone. And every time you show up here, you're making a choice to be the kind of person who looks deeper, who doesn't settle for the surface, who understands that the real shift happens not in one big moment, but in 1,000 quiet ones that nobody sees. And honestly, the fact that you're still here tells me something about you. It tells me that somewhere inside you already know what we've been talking about. You didn't learn it today. You recognized it, like remembering something you forgot you knew. So let me take you one step further, because there's one more piece of this that ties everything together. The observation you're making right now, in this moment as you listen, as you sit with whatever is stirring inside you, this observation matters. Not tomorrow's, not the one you'll try to make during next week's meditation. This one, the one happening in your chest right now. The quality of your attention right here is collapsing a wave. And if you can feel that, even faintly, then you already understand something that most people spend their entire lives missing. You don't need to go looking for a new reality. You need to become still enough for it to find you. You need to stop chasing the collapse and let the wave do what it was always designed to do. Organize itself around the clearest signal in the room. And that signal is you. Not the you that worries, not the you that plans, not the you that scrolls through life looking for something to fix, the you that's here, that's present, that's breathing, that's listening not just with ears, but with something deeper, something that doesn't have a name but knows exactly what I'm talking about. That version of you is the observer that changes everything, and it's not something you need to build, it's something you need to stop burying. So, here we are. We started with a particle, a tiny invisible thing fired through a slit in a laboratory wall, and we watched it do something impossible. We watched it exist in all places at once, until someone looked, and then it chose. One path, one position, one reality. And then we turned the lens around, slowly, carefully, and we pointed it at you, at the way you wake up in the morning already expecting the day to feel a certain way, at the way your heart sends a signal before your brain has time to think, at the identity you've been carrying like a second skin, so tight, so familiar that you forgot it wasn't yours to begin with. We walked through the void, that awful, beautiful, necessary space where the old self dissolves and the new one hasn't yet taken shape, where the temptation to go back is loudest, where the silence between who you were and who you're becoming feels like it might swallow you whole. And we came out the other side, not with a formula, not with a 5-step plan, with something much more dangerous, with awareness. Because once you see the observer, once you truly understand that your state is not a reaction to your life, but the cause of it, you can't go back to sleep. You can pretend. You can scroll. You can fill the silence with noise. But the knowing is in you now. Quiet, patient, unshakable. And that knowing will follow you into every room, every conversation, every decision you make from this moment forward.